The Bible Treasury. A monthly magazine of papers on scriptural subjects. Volume 17, Article 15, 1888 and 1889. God's Ways in Training His Own for His Service and Testimony. Being Lectures on the Book of Jonah. From the German of Wort der Wahrheit in Liebe. J. A. von Posek. Chapter 1. 2 Essential Requisites for Every Laborer in the Work of the Lord. It is a well-known truth confirmed by daily experience, that justification by faith, and peace with God, are not one and the same thing, nor do they take place at the same time, though the latter is the consequence of the former. As soon as one believes, he is safe and justified before God, but it may be some time before the soul enjoys settled peace with God. It is dangerous for one who has no real solid peace with God, to be engaged in the service of the Lord and the testimony of divine truth, for he is apt, though unintentionally, to preach or teach what he has not experienced in his own soul. And where the conscience has not been purged and set free and is not kept sweet in the presence of God, an unbroken will generally manifests itself. Such have then, sooner or later, to pass through bone and heartbreaking experience in the school of God, in the belly of the fish, as it were, to learn practically the terrible nature and effects of sin, of self-will and of the desperately wicked heart. And then, when human help and deliverance appear impossible, to throw themselves, like Jacob, upon the Lord, and exclaim, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." There are then 2 essential requisites for practical fitness and usefulness in the work of the Lord for every believer, especially such whom the Lord will use for his work and testimony. These are 1. A broken will, and 2. A broken heart. True it is, that every Christian has to make lifelong humbling experience of the existence and activity of his own will, and of his own evil heart. But it is no less true, that there is a time in the life of every true Christian, where our all-gracious and all-wise God with his mighty hand, in the school of deep trials, breaks our natural will to pieces, that we may learn to say in truth, "Not my will be done, but thine," when we shall find, that his hand is as tender as it is mighty. Every day's experience, even in common life, bears testimony to the necessity of the perverse natural will being kept in with bit and bridle. A young horse, which has not been in due time broken in, will be of no use to its master. With our will unbroken, we are unable to discern and to prove what is that good, and acceptable, and perfect will of God, whether as to the practical difficulties of daily life or as to his work and service. As the fog conceals the sun, so our own will hides from us the will of God. But if in the school of deep trials and sorrows, often alas, caused by our self-will, we have learned to judge our evil, foolish, and perverse will, and to abhor it, we shall be able to prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. As with the will, so with the heart. He that trusteth in his own heart is a fool. And why? Because it is desperately wicked, and deceitful above all things. None but a fool would trust a wicked man, or believe one who is a thorough deceiver. In your heart do you confide? God's heart from yourself you hide. But when our heart with its perverse or idolatrous inclinations, lusts, designs, and plans, has been broken practically, God can reveal unto us his own heart of grace, love, and tender sympathy. In this world of sin and sorrow, there is a saying that such and such have died of a broken heart. But God teaches us to live with a broken heart, aye, and live very happy with it too. A broken will enables us to serve the Lord, but a broken heart makes us serve him after his own heart, in spirit and in truth. Jonah, courageous servant of God though he was, had not yet learnt to deny himself, his own will and judgment, to be dependent upon God alone. He was thinking of his own position, his own importance, of his own dignity and character as a prophet, forgetting that he was God's prophet. No sooner does he receive a commandment from God, the carrying out of which, in his opinion, might possibly impair the dignified character of his prophetic ministry, than he goes his own way and attempts to flee from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord soon showed him the folly of such an attempt, and Jonah had to learn some crushing lessons, 2 of them in the belly of the fish at the bottom of the sea, the 3rd under the gourd. Our meditations on this most instructive little portion of Holy Writ, therefore, naturally divide themselves into 2 parts. 1. What Jonah learnt in the fish's belly. 2. What he learnt under the gourd. Before entering upon the first part of our meditations, I would direct the attention of the reader to the various characters of the instruments employed by the Lord, to train and fit each one for his service. What a difference between the mighty storm and the sultry, silent, east wind, between the huge fish and the little worm and the gourd. Further, what a difference of the scenes. In the first chapter the deafening roar of the tempest, and the howling uproar of the elements; in the second chapter the silence of the grave in the belly of the fish at the bottom of the sea. Then again, in the third chapter the immense fluctuation, turmoil, cruising in traffic of the capital of the ancient world, compared with the quiet rural scene under the gourd, on the east of Nineveh, presented in the fourth chapter. What contrasts! Jehovah hurled the storm on the sea. He prepared the great fish. He prepared the gourd, or palm Christ tree. It was he again that prepared the worm, and he prepared the sultry, or silent, east wind. How different these agents and links in the chain of divine providence! Yet they must all work together for Jonah's good. How much more does this hold good for us, Christian reader? And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to purpose. Blessed be his great and glorious name.